Welcome to another episode of Shire Travels. In this one, we are heading to Western Australia. We are travelling from Perth in the south, all the way up the west coast via the Ningaloo, inland to Karijini, and then finally up to Broome. Now, if you look at YouTube these days, you're probably thinking, oh, if I'm going to WA, I need 6 months to 2 years, and I need a big lifted four-wheel drive and an off-grid, off-road caravan. You don't. We did this trip over 3 weeks, and we did it in a motorhome. So if you are short on time because you're traveling school holidays or you only have a certain amount of annual leave like we did and you don't have a four-wheel drive, this itinerary, this trip will be perfect for you. If you do, however, have a four-wheel drive, still relevant. We're still going to all the best spots. I'll point out a few places that we couldn't get to because we're in a two-wheel drive and a few other tracks that you can do if you are in a four-wheel drive. So we did this trip in a motorhome. We booked its motorhome through Motorhome Republic. It was a Maui motorhome. I think it was their river model, so it can sleep up to 6 people. There are only 2 of us in it. Why did we choose this one? Well, if you've seen our Ghan story, you might roll your eyes at this, but I actually won the hire of it in a competition. So you had to go onto Motorhome Republic's website. They had a whole list of routes on their websites that you could take. You had to say which one you wanted to do and why. So I chose Perth to Broome and said that I wanted to explore the West Coast, but obviously said it in the best way because I won, which was fantastic. So it included the hire of the motorhome. I think it was up to a certain amount. It might have been up to about $3,000, which covered pretty much all of it back then. So this was done in 2017. And it also included the one-way fee and a couple of extra things like chairs they threw in at a table. We had to cover our own flights, we had to cover our own accommodation, insurance, and all the rest of it. But the cost of the motorhome was the biggest cost of all. So it was a really good prize to win. We just chose the biggest motorhome that we could get in order to be able to, I guess, make the most out of the voucher. We loved this one because it had a bathroom, it had a kitchen, it had a big seating area at the back, and it also had a bed above the cabin as well. So we slept above the cabin and then we could leave the rest of the motorhome set up exactly how it was. So we didn't have to be packing up and setting down sofas into beds or packing up our bed each day. So that actually worked really well, having the big motorhome. We did this trip at the start of May. It was quite warm during the day, not too cold at night at all. It was also outside of the cyclone season, so the northwest area of WA can be hit by cyclones around February, March, even April. Going in May meant we were a little bit more confident that we wouldn't experience that extreme weather. The weather for us was fantastic. It was sunny. It wasn't actually too windy, which might surprise people because WA means windy always. So planning this trip, now it might be quite hard to believe these days. Back when we did this trip, doing YouTube, being a content creator and all that wasn't really a thing. So there were almost no videos on the West Coast, which probably seems crazy to think because nowadays everyone is on the West Coast. It is impossible to book campsites. It's so busy apparently. So when we came to booking things and finding places to stay and activities to do, we really just had to look at people's travel blog websites rather than being able to watch videos and things like that. The other thing I used was Lonely Planet's West Coast Australia. So this was invaluable. And for most of our trip, this was all I had to go by to book where we wanted to stay and the activities that we wanted to do, which probably seems a little bit strange because I know myself, if I'm looking to travel somewhere, I'm probably going to get on YouTube first and check out accommodation, activities, and all the rest of it. So we flew from Melbourne directly to Perth, which takes around 4 hours. We actually stayed in Fremantle for a couple of nights before we picked up our motorhome, and the reason we did this was because we wanted to head to Rottnest Island. So Rottnest Island is about a 20-minute ferry ride, I think, from Fremantle. We took the fast ferry out there. We spent the whole day there riding bikes around the island and just seeing a few different beaches and a few different sites along the way. So when we were heading over there, we were quite excited, would we be able to see quokkas? Would we be able to get a selfie with one? And when we got there, you couldn't move for quokkas. They were everywhere. They will come up to you. Unfortunately, people feed them. Don't feed them if you're going because it can make them really sick. But because people do feed them, they kind of come straight up to you, see what you're doing. So you needn't have worried if you are going there and you're thinking, oh, will I get to see one? You will. Just stand still long enough and one will come up to you. And then you can get the amazing Quokka selfie. So it's quite funny. They do look like they are smiling. They're very cute. So hiring bikes worked really well for us. From memory, I don't think it was too expensive at all, and we might have actually booked it as part of the ferry as a package just to save a bit of extra money. We stopped off at a few different bays. We saw the lighthouse. We also went kind of up to the top where they've got an old disused railway and some old World War II history. You can also see out over the whole island here, which is quite interesting. It was actually far bigger than what we had anticipated. And for the afternoon, we made our way to Parker Point. This is a very popular spot to shore up your boat and go swimming and snorkeling for the day. We thought it was just beautiful. There were so many beautiful beaches there. Lovely blue water, white sand. The temperature in that time of year at May was actually pretty good, considering that's kind of getting into the winter months. We found it pleasant enough to go swimming. We headed back to Fremantle. We also checked out Little Creatures Brewery on the waterfront, which was really nice. And then the next day we picked up our motorhome. So we just got a taxi from our accommodation to the motorhome depot to pick it up. They talked us through how to do everything on the motorhome. Funnily enough, we never used the toilet in the motorhome. It was our first time ever doing something like this. We had never had a caravan before. And we were like, whoa, chemicals and finding a dump point, that sounds a bit too hard. So we just didn't use it at all. The other thing was things like wiki camps back there, I don't actually think it existed back in that time. And like I said, there was nothing on YouTube in terms of traveling the West Coast. So knowing where to find dump points, knowing where to top up water tanks and things like that seemed a little bit daunting to us. So we chose to stay at caravan parks most of the way just to make sure that we weren't reliant on trying to find water or trying to find somewhere to dump the toilet. Once we picked up our motorhome, we went to, I think, just a random suburb outside of Perth just to find a supermarket so we could park up our big motorhome, load it up with groceries and start heading north. So as well as pre-booking our accommodation, another thing I did was bought a WA Parks Pass. So I believe back then you could buy a month-long pass. Worked for us, we're going to be there for 3 weeks. And we knew that this would get us into pretty much everywhere that we were going. Still worked out far cheaper than if we decided to pay at every national park that we were going into. The first stop on our trip was to the Pinnacles. So these are at Nambung National Park. It's a couple of hours north of Perth. There's a big car park there. They actually have motorhome and caravan parking there as well. And you kind of can just do a self-guided walk, or you can actually do a drive through the Pinnacles. Now, what are the Pinnacles? Scientists aren't actually really sure what they are. They aren't too interested in them because apparently they're not very old. I think they might only be a few million years old, and scientists are only really interested in things which are hundreds of millions of years old. So there's not really much is known about them. It's just kind of fun to go and see. You really feel like you are on Mars there. The sand is such a yellow, orangey kind of color, and the rock formations are just really random. They go for quite a distance as well, so you look around, you can just see them everywhere. They're all different shapes and sizes. So it's quite a fun place to stop and get a few pictures, stretch the legs. They also have a visitor and information center there as well. Then it was time to hit the road. So what you can see here is just something you need to be aware of when you're on the road, and that is that there are huge mining trucks that come down carrying big pieces of equipment. Here they had a pilot car in front, so they waved to us and signaled to us to get off the road because we didn't have a UHF. We then watched the trucks go by, and there was another vehicle at the end who waved to us that it was safe to go back onto the road. Sometimes you don't have much notice, you do just need to pull over as and where you can. Luckily for us in this situation, we had quite a lot of room on the hard shoulder, and the surface was quite level and rocky. Okay, sorry, just had to do an outfit change. Gotta love that Melbourne weather. So after the Pinnacles, we headed up to Geraldton. So that's about a 3-hour drive. Now, on the way, we did miss out on a lot of really beautiful spots. If you have a bit more time, definitely stop in at Cervantes, Jurien Bay, Green Head. There's some really nice beach camping along there. Now, why would we miss all those beautiful places to go to Geraldton, which, let's be honest, probably isn't on anyone's bucket list? Well, we're actually doing a tour from Geraldton out to the Abrolhos Islands. So we just did a half-day tour out to the Abrolhos Islands. This was actually a tour by plane, so they fly you from Geraldton and land on one of the islands, spend the morning there, and then fly back just in time for lunch. There were 2 planes that went out, each of them had about 6 people on. One was a full-day tour, one was a half-day tour. And flying out over the islands was incredible. I had no idea just how beautiful the reef would be. And as you can see from some of these pictures, the reef is just stunning. The clarity of the water as well. If we look down, we can see sharks swimming about. This picture here is showing you some dolphins playing in all the big waves. It was incredible. The other thing we could see as well was some of the islands actually have some infrastructure on them because there is a big crabbing industry out there. So there's actually been a few TV shows that have gone out there and seen how it is all ran. So I'm pretty sure Author Adventure's been out there. Martin Clunes also did one, Islands of Australia, and he went out there and had a look at the industry out there and how the people live. So there's a whole community out there. The bigger island actually has a school on it as well. So there's people that stay out there pretty much all year to do the crabbing. So as we're flying around, the pilots were giving us commentary. And one of the stories they were telling us is the story of the Batavia. Now, you can Google the story of this, or I would recommend actually looking for the Case File podcast about the Batavia. I think there's 1 or 2 episodes about it. The Batavia was a ship that was shipwrecked in 1629 on the reef. And then the captain actually went for help with some people, and the passengers were left behind with some of the crew. And what unfolded there was just horrendous. It's a pretty dark story. When the captain left, he actually left some soldiers behind to help look after the passengers that were left. When all the terrible things started happening, these soldiers actually escaped to a different island, and they built themselves a small fort. And when we were flying, we got to see this small fort still down on one of the islands. Now, it's not the most impressive structure you've ever seen, but when you think it was built in 1629, it's been out on that tiny island, exposed to the weather and the sea the whole time, it's still standing there. And it's actually the first European structure that was built on Australian soil. So it was really fascinating to see. I would definitely recommend researching the story of the Batavia, and if you can get on a tour out to the Abrolhos Islands, it really is a fascinating place to see. So after we had flown around for a while, we actually landed at one of the islands. So we landed at East Wallaby Island, which has a small runway, and then we walked around to Turtle Bay, and this is where we set ourselves up for snorkeling and also to have some morning tea. Now, the snorkeling there was so-so. The water clarity wasn't that great. We didn't see really any marine life at all. The only thing I did see was a jellyfish, which when I described it to our tour guides or pilots after we came out of the water, they were like, oh, that's great. So it probably wasn't one which was too friendly. Turtle Bay itself was beautiful. Lovely, clear, flat, calm blue water. There were actually a couple of yachts parked there as well. I think if I was sailing around, that's where I'd park up as well. There were also a couple of wallabies on the island, as the name might suggest. After we had had our morning tea and a swim, it was time for us to head back to our plane, to head back to Geraldton. This was a really good tour. I would definitely recommend it. We just did the tour with Geraldton Air and booked it with them directly. I believe there also used to be a boat trip out there, a day trip on a big boat. However, that company closed down very quickly. I'm not quite sure what the story is there. I think there's also some companies that run multi-day tours out there for diving, and it would be a fantastic place to dive. As well as the Batavia, there would be a whole host of shipwrecks out there, really good marine life. So if you're into your diving, that would definitely be a place to stop at and spend a bit more time. Once we landed, it was back in the Maui and on to our next destination. The next stop on our tour is Kalbarri. So Kalbarri is a nice little seaside town. It has the Murchison River that flows through it, and most people go there to go and visit Kalbarri National Park, which is why we went there. So on the way into Kalbarri, there are a few different places that you can stop off and see. There's quite a few lookouts along the cliffs with parking. You can pull in and have a look. The power of the ocean there is incredible. We saw some really big, crazy waves. We also stopped at a place called Pot Alley, which is kind of old lava tubes that you can walk down and again really see firsthand the power of the ocean. We stayed at a caravan park in town, and during the evening we went out and just had a bit of dinner. Unfortunately for us, at the time we were there, you couldn't drive yourself into Kalbarri National Park. For whatever reason, the road was closed and the only way you could get in there was to be part of an organised tour. This wasn't great. It meant that we were quite restricted in what we could do because of money, because of time. They also didn't have any of the walking tracks open as well, which was a shame. So the first place we stopped was a beautiful lookout. Now, if you were to go to the same lookout today, this is where the skywalks are. So the skywalks are two platforms that overhang the cliff. So this is what it used to look like before they were there. It was a really beautiful spot to see all the cliffs and the river. And then it was on to Nature's Window. So Nature's Window is what most people would know kind of the Kalbarri National Park for. If you Google it, this is probably the picture that's going to come up. It is actually a really beautiful spot. Yes, everyone wants to get their picture sat inside the window and it can be quite busy and you kind of have to wait your turn, get your picture done. So as I said, we were there as part of a tour group. So there are about 20 of us there. During peak times these days, it might be really, really busy. If you get there early in the morning or stay there later in the evening, you probably have a better chance of getting it to yourself, or there'll be far less people around. The walk down to Nature's Window and back is fairly easy going. There's a formed path at the start, and then you do have to step down kind of a rocky section in order to get to the window. It isn't too bad though. Anyone with an average level of fitness will be able to do it. And it's probably only a 200-300 meter walk from the car park. The last stop on our tour was the Z Bend Lookout. So this is where the river curves round in a Z shape. It was quite a nice lookout as far as lookouts go. Another thing to note is that we were there in May and the flies were pretty thick. So consider bringing a head net with you. So the Murchison River flows through Kalbarri town and then meets the ocean. It's a really interesting spot to go and sit and spend a bit of time looking at the bird life. So we saw a whole range of different birds there. I think they also do pelican feeding there as well. But it's a really nice spot to sit yourself for an afternoon, have a bit of a picnic and just watch all the bird life. While the ocean is pretty wild, the area around the river is slightly like a beach, so I think there are areas where you can hop in and have a bit of a swim. Once our time in Kalbarri was over, it was time to keep heading north and to head to what was one of our favourite places on our trip, Shark Bay. It was just under 4 hours to get to Denham. Our first stop was to Hamlin Pool to have a look at the stromatolites. Those stromatolites are living fossils basically. They are 3.5 billion years old and they are the oldest living organisms on Earth. And when you look at them, granted, they are not that impressive to look at. They're basically kind of look like rocks about this big. But when you think about how old they are, it's kind of hard to comprehend. When we were there, we could walk out onto a boardwalk. They had some interpretive signs and you can see them all in the water there. We did this tour in 2017, but unfortunately in 2021, there was a huge cyclone that hit the area. And unfortunately, the boardwalk that you can see in these pictures was completely wiped out. The beach was also closed off there just to try and help preserve what was left there of the stromatolites. So they have started rebuilding that boardwalk and it could be potentially next year that it's due to reopen again. The The next stop on our trip was just down the road at Shell Beach. So yes, you might have guessed it, it is a beach made of shells. Very small white shells, really pretty. We stopped off here just to have a little look and also somewhere to stop and have some lunch. So it's a good spot to get a few of the Instagram shots of holding the shells or throwing them up in the air. There's also a really nice shallow protected bay there. If you did decide to go for a swim though, the water there is really salty, so you may find that you float more than you normally would. From Shell Beach, we drove through the town of Denham on our way to Monkey Mia Resort. Now Denham is a really pretty town. We had no idea. It has a beautiful big foreshore area which has a playground and a jetty. It has a couple of caravan parks and a few shops and would be a really good place to base yourself to explore the Shark Bay area. We decided to stay at Monkey Mia as it was more of a all-in-one resort, so being in the motorhome, not being able to get out and about as easily than if we were in a kind of a car or caravan, we decided it'd be better to base ourselves somewhere where we had access to a pool and a nice beach. They have a restaurant there and a bar, so it's kind of an all-in-one. We really like Monkey Mia. A lot of people quite recently have given it a bit of a bad rap. We quite liked it for being kind of a holiday within the holiday. So like I said, they do have quite a nice beach there. It doesn't have the most amazing turquoise water that you'll find in other destinations on this trip, but it was still really nice and calm. The water was quite warm. Again, they have a pool, they have a restaurant, they have a bar. And obviously one of the big draw cards of Monkey Mia is the dolphins. Now, a lot of people have been saying that there's this hidden fee that you have to pay when you get there. Like I said, we went back in 2017. There was not much information on YouTube or social media about the resort, but we still found it very easy to know that we had to pay this extra fee. So I believe it's an extra $10 per person, and that gets you entry into the conservation park. So Monkey Mia is actually technically a conservation park, so it's not covered by your park's WA pass. Now some people get a bit grumpy about this. If you're staying there, I can kind of see that side of it. You're already paying to stay there, so why do you have to pay this extra charge? If you're coming in for a day trip though, it's definitely worth paying the money because that then also gives you access to all the resort facilities. So you can go use their pool and games room, restaurant, and see the dolphin feeding, and you can really make a day of it. So on our first evening at Monkey Mia, we booked onto a sunset cruise. So cruised around the bay at Monkey Mia. You could bring your own drinks. I think it went for about an hour all up. Watch the sunset. Every now and again you'll see a dolphin pop up, which was quite nice. And it was really beautiful cruise, good atmosphere. I don't think it was too expensive from memory, maybe about $50 per person. And it was a great spot to see the sunset. Really beautiful calm waters. As we came back into the resort, the jetty, there were lots of little birds that were flying around. So we really enjoyed it and would recommend it. Now, the next morning we woke up nice and early to catch the 7 o'clock dolphin feeding. So you get up, you go and queue by it's like the visitors center place, and you're not allowed down to the beach until they tell you. And they're very strict about that. So we all have to wait up there, corralled together. There's us and probably 100 or so other people. Now we decided already that rather than trying to go down to the water's edge and shove an elbow to try and get a picture of a dolphin, maybe try and be one of the people that are chosen to feed the dolphins, we just go up onto the jetty. So we went up onto the jetty when they said it was okay for everyone to go down. That actually gave us a really good view of the dolphins, and there were hardly any people up there. So as you can see, everyone goes along the water's edge, and they have people there who talk you through the dolphins' history, who each of the dolphins are, why they feed them, etc. And then they choose 3 people to come out and give a fish to a dolphin. Now I have heard that the 7 o'clock feeding is the busiest, and if you go later in the day at some of the other times that they do feedings, it's much quieter. So if that's something that you want to do, I'd recommend maybe going a little bit later. One of the reasons why we also went up onto the jetty rather than getting in the crowd was that we got picked up for a tour at about 7:30. So we did a full day tour out to the Francois Peron National Park. I booked this directly with Ocean Park, and they are the organisation company that also run the Shark Bay Oceanarium, which a lot of people go to. We didn't get a chance, but everyone who goes there says it's fantastic. You can get right up close and personal with turtles and all different fish, sharks, and everyone who goes there says it's really good. So there are only 4 of us on the tour. Myself, Tom, a older German couple, and then our driver, who was also a marine biologist. They picked us up and we drove to Francois Peron National Park. Now it's full drive only national park, so we stopped for a bit and let some air out the tyres. Quite a lot of the tracks in there are sand, and you can also drive on the beach in there as well. So we headed off on our drive. There were a few little stops on the way in that we had a look at, and then we drove along one of the beaches to get to somewhere where we were heading to for morning tea, by some sand dunes and kind of cliffs. And as we're driving down the beach, we see, oh look, there's some dolphins. So we stop the car and we have the most amazing dolphin encounter experience like ever. It's so good, even the tour guide is getting out his phone and taking pictures and videos and saying, whoa, this is amazing. So we park up on the beach and start watching this dolphin, and it is hunting. And it's hunting these tiny little fish. And what it's doing to try and catch them is it's pushing them closer to the beach. Then it was aquaplaning through the waves up onto the beach and then back into the water to try and get this tiny little fish. And it was just incredible. The power of the dolphin, how close they were to us as well. And I got what was possibly the best picture I think I have ever taken in my entire life. A picture which I don't think I would ever be able to take again. I don't think I'm ever going to be able to experience ever again. And it was just such an amazing moment. And the dolphin just did not care that we were there. Every now and again you see it pop its head up, have a little look at us. It just did not care. And to go from the experience at Monkey Mia in the morning, so just a reminder of what that looked like, to what we were experiencing there was just incredible. If you can get out to Francois Peron National Park, I would 100% recommend it. Granted, you may not have the same dolphin experience, but there's a good chance you will see dolphins there in the wild, and dolphins, I guess, doing what they naturally do as opposed to at Monkey Mia when they just swim in circles waiting for someone to literally put a fish in their mouth. So if you haven't got a 4-wheel drive, definitely hop on a tour. There was also a small school of sharks there as well, and not wanting to be outdone by the dolphin, they also put on a little display for us, coming right up to the beach and splashing around in the water. It really was an amazing and unique experience, and it also showed us why it's called Shark Bay. So we drove through some sand dunes and had some morning tea next to some really bright red cliffs, which was just beautiful. Then we made our way over to Bottle Bay, and as we're driving along the beach, looking out the window, and I'm like, what's that shadow in the water? Like, it doesn't look like a dolphin. And it was a huge tiger shark. So a massive tiger shark. I think it probably would have been at least 3 meters, just cruising along in the waves. This isn't the best footage, but it gives you some idea of actually just how big it is. So we drove down to Bottle Bay, and then our tour guide was like, right, let's hop in and do some snorkeling. Tom and I were like, ha ha ha, very funny. And he was like, no, this is where we're going to snorkel. And we were like, shouldn't we be worried that there's a tiger shark like a couple 100 meters down the beach? And he said, no, I'm a marine biologist, trust me. Tiger sharks are scavengers. They are not the type of sharks who are probably gonna make a beeline for you and take a chomp out of you. And then he also made a fair point, which was that whether you can see them or not, the sharks are still there. If we hadn't spotted that shark, it still would have been there, so what's the difference? Then the final piece of advice our tour guide had was that if you hear the music, then it's time to get out the water. The music, the Jaws theme, da 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 da. So we hopped in, we went for a bit of a snorkel. There wasn't actually too much to see there. There wasn't really much in the way of a reef, and the water clarity wasn't that great. We did see a turtle there, but it looked quite sick. It was just kind of sat on the bottom. It didn't really react when we swam by it. It was at the point where I was looking at the turtle as I was snorkeling, and I was thinking, oh, the poor thing is just sitting there waiting to be picked off by something like a shark. There's a shark nearby. And that's where I slowly made my way back to the beach, not trying to alarm anyone. So then we headed to Skipjack Point, and we did a bit of a walk just around the top of the sand dunes, looking down at all the bird life below and the marine life. There's so much marine life there. You can spot turtles, sharks, dugongs, stingrays, all sorts of things there. And then we went up to the Cape Peron lookout as well, and again, just saw heaps of marine life there. Really, really beautiful spot. Everywhere you go along there, you've got the bright red cliffs and the blue ocean, and it just looks amazing. If you are traveling with a drone, it is a really nice place to get some drone shots with all the contrasting colors as well. Once our tour was over, it was time to start heading out of the national park. Now they do have a homestead there, so the national park used to actually be a sheep station. So they have some of the old shearing sheds there, and we walked around them and had a quick look. They also have an artesian hot tub there. We didn't use it, but I've heard other people use it. Apparently it is very, very hot, but worth a dip if you're there on a cooler day. So if you do have a four-wheel drive, not only is Francois Peron National Park, there's also Steep Point and Dirk-Hartog Island. So these are definitely four-wheel drive only. The road out to Steep Point, which is the westernmost point of mainland Australia, the road is very bumpy and sandy. As well as Steep Point, there's also Dirk-Hartog Island, so you can get a ferry over to the island there and explore their beautiful beach camping and their homestead there, and that's definitely on our bucket list for next time. So that concludes part 1 of our Perth to Broome road trip. In the next one, we explore Coral Bay, Cape Range National Park and the Ningaloo, Karijini, and then finally make our way to Broome. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below, and I will see you in the next one.